I hope I'm not talking out of turn to my Ghanaian crew, but I don't rate you if you don't rate Kwame Nkrumah.
I'm always in my mind, battling like 666.
That was a man who believed in Africa, and he was way too driven to be a passenger. He led Ghana all the way to independence, back in early March 1957, and when it came to other freedom fighters, he would check in. He changed the stride that society would step in. African was the only side that he was repping. But he wasn't a gangster supplying people's weapons. His level of investment in education and development is evidence of his dedication. Freedom fighters from all over the motherland came to Ghana, all hoping to understand how to overcome the colonial upper hand, how to recover land. They linked up and planned. They studied and trained against every violent tendency of Western, imperialist, white supremacy.
Lord of mercy, bless the man them moving 30. Lord of mercy, bless the man them moving 30. We're moving 30, we're moving 30. 30, we're moving 30. Lord of mercy, bless the man them moving 30.
Nkrumah wanted to build a United States of Africa. He didn't just say it though, his actions backed it up. From conferences for leaders across the continent to a newspaper and radio station pushing African consciousness. He was about backing the African no matter the consequence. His government put in place free primary education, making it happen, not just signing the legislation. They had a simple policy. Nobody's free till everybody's free. And they knew the art of putting money where your mouth is without trying to act like the one who wears the trousers. They supported Africans just because they were African. It's what we all wish the continent had. We actually had it then. Like in '58, when France held a referendum for its African colonies, asking if they wanted to leave. And Guinea said, peace, leave us alone, please. France said, cool, but it was gonna be beef. Ghana got 26 milli and sent it to Guinea. See, on the world stage, Nkrumah was the continent's representative, really.
Lord of mercy, bless the man them moving 30.
From now on today, we must change our attitudes, our minds. We must realize that from now on, we are no more a colonial, but a free and independent people.
Oh, please believe the CIA was lurking. Kwame must have been Africa's most famous person. All sorts of people flooded into Ghana, and of course, some were bringing drama. America and Britain had to act like they liked Nkrumah because they knew he was hard to bully. See, they had a policy of not letting anyone be friends with the Russians, and Kwame chose to disregard it fully. So after independence, when things were calmer, the CIA went into Ghana. They kept an eye on everyone, from the people in the streets to the guys in power. And what do you think happened to the info gathered from a spy's encounter? It went from the agents to the officers to the bosses to the office of U.S. President Eisenhower. He and Kwame weren't fans of each other. Their mutual suspicion was more than just a rumor. Nkrumah didn't trust Eisenhower, and Eisenhower didn't trust Nkrumah. By 1958, Ghana was independent, but all its neighbors were under Western pressure. So Kwame invited African revolutionaries over to Accra for a little get-together. It was only right that he did the honors, hosting freedom fighters, leaders, and scholars. But this became the entry point for the CIA's secretive dollars.
Dollars all around, who this dollars all around. Dollar bills, yeah, dollar bills. On my frequency. staring at me since you walked in the bar.
The All-African People's Conference wasn't just some heads of state having a meeting. It included emancipation movements and some labor unions, all pushing for African freedom.
I don't need no fake love, no, I don't need no fake love.
There was a banner saying, "Hands off Africa." The man there set out the play. And their message to their Western oppressors was simple. Get out the way.
Out of my way, I'm gonna get paid, yeah. I wanna get paid, yeah. Just give me my moolah, la la. Get the fuck out of my way, I'm gonna get paid, yeah. I'm gonna get paid, yeah. Just give me my moolah, la la. I really like to party.
Everyone was there, and they'd come prepared. Imagine 28 territories in attendance, all trying to achieve independence. Tapping in, far away and nearby Africans. One man was there by accident. That man was tall and slim. He'd fallen into this thing because another freedom fighter couldn't make it, and someone ended up calling him. His name was Patrice Lumumba, and at this conference he would meet Nkrumah. Lumumba was 7 months away from becoming Prime Minister of Belgian Congo. What's funny is, he and Nkrumah had no common language, so they used translators whenever they held a convo. What's not so funny is, unbeknownst to him, Patrice's translator was CIA. Still, that doesn't take away from this monumental day. It changed the world in a fundamental way. The All-African People's Conference was like a revolutionary magnet. All that unity we always wish we had. We actually had it. There was Félix Moumier from Cameroon, a revolutionary, not a government leader, kind of like Askia and Paklele from South Africa, and Joshua Nkomo from then Southern Rhodesia. Out of the delegates, there were only 8 women, combining feminism with anti-racism, like Martha Wande, another Cameroonian, representing the Women's Democratic Union. And please believe that the wider diaspora also came to be inspired by Africa, like Shirley Graham, who read out a letter from her husband, W.E.B. Du Bois, and Islanda Robeson, the multi-talented wife of Paul Robeson, a powerful female voice. Some say the success of the conference was down to a man called George Padmore. He saw this work as a higher calling than the medicine degree he left Trinidad for. Never before, and maybe not since, has there been such a powerful Pan-African link-up. Respect was paid, connections made, and there was food and vibes like they were having a drink-up. If Africa was like this in 2011, do you think the West would have intervened in Libya? That's a different story. My point is, there's a reason why this scene doesn't seem familiar. There's a reason why we're all moving scattered. What do you think happened? The AAPC signaled a bigger threat. Behind Africa, picture Europe's silhouette. Furthermore, picture any Western leader standing in the shadows, lighting up a cigarette.
Tomorrow, the United States of Africa.
The West weren't fans of this pan-Africanism. It clashed with their plans to expand capitalism. Nkrumah wanted to modernize Africa and turn the continent from worker to manufacturer. But Western leaders of industry couldn't entertain the prospect of Africa catching up. Now, in order to modernize Ghana, Nkrumah reached out to Canada for help with some new technology, nuclear energy, but not for nuclear weaponry, only for the purpose of reducing poverty, because it could be used to juice a huge economy. It's a technology Canada used itself, but under US pressure, they refused to help. So Nkrumah was forced to turn to the Soviets, and the US acted all concerned, acting like it weren't appropriate to get rejected by the West and work with Soviets, acting like Nkrumah voluntarily chose to get help from an enemy. This was a web of American provocations interwoven with British intelligence operations. Spies were everywhere, and one of their main entry modes was what we now call NGOs.
Congress for Cultural Freedom, American Society for African American.
Tensions rose all the way to 1960, 2 years after the AAPC, when the West was secretly reclaiming Congo, which bribe money from the CIA made easy. Nkrumah criticized France for testing nuclear bombs in the Sahara Desert, because when the wind blew the radiation into African countries, the effects were far from pleasant. He wanted to stay on good terms with the West, but he spoke on whatever he thought was wrong, though. Still, nothing opened Nkrumah's eyes, like how the Western powers dealt with Congo. When Patrice Lumumba won leadership of the Congo and Belgium reinvaded the country within a week, Kwame Nkrumah sent Ghanaian troopers as part of a UN force to keep the peace. Now the US stood back. That shocked Nkrumah because he knew the rightful leader to be Patrice. America's silence was highly fishy. The whole situation was high-key risky, but regardless, Nkrumah kept Ghanaian soldiers in Congo throughout 1960, because he knew the West wanted to take everything we got.
I can't trust my man, so I'll just nick him.
The truth is, America wanted Congo's uranium, the secret ingredient of nuclear power. They'd started developing Congo's nuclear power when Belgium was still in charge 2 years prior. Now that the Congo was independent, that whole arrangement would soon expire, especially with the rise of the new Messiah. Patrice Lumumba made it through the fire. He'd been locked up and beaten up on his rise to the top. Still wasn't someone the colonizers could stop. And he'd made it clear Congo's natural wealth would be staying here.
Take everything, it's got colonization. I can't trust my man, so I'll just nick him. 14 first time the pigs raided. Ever since then I stopped eating bacon. Stopped chasing the back when I turn it to one. Area boy, we can't fear no one. Done the dirt, no face like M-Manchu. Done the dirt, no face like M-Manchu.
Nkrumah had barely known Lumumba for 2 years, but in that time they'd become like brothers. Both men lived for the freedom struggle and stayed loyal to the cause, unlike others. They shared a vision of an independent Africa and worked on plans to unify the region. The union of Ghana and the Congo was just the start, but they secured it with a signed agreement. Nkrumah sent doctors and technicians to Congo. Since the Belgians left a skills gap, Ghana was a little better educated. And as a temporary fix, they were happy to fill that. The spirit of panafricanism was so strong, you could hear Ghanaian compassion across the nation. But Nkrumah knew the mission could go wrong, so he reached out to the whole African population.
The Congo is the heart of Africa. Any wound inflicted upon the Congo is a wound to the whole of Africa. Outside intervention in the Congo is a threat to the independence of every African state and a further extension of the Cold War.
Across the continent, Kwame Nkrumah was widely connected because he made moves that were highly respected, like offering asylum to Africans suffering in silence and teaching methods of pushing back against the governmental violence. According to a CIA report,
Ghana's influence, or interference, is felt in all sections of the continent. Under the direct supervision of Nkrumah, the Bureau of African Affairs masterminds the activities of more than 100 agents throughout Africa.
now he needed Africans to stand up in the UN and make the West abandon the plan they'd been pursuing to destabilize the Congo. But it was too late. The US had gone rogue. America's government and intelligence agencies pressured individual African states to withdraw support for Lumumba's government and forced delegates to stop having debates. See, every year in New York, the United Nations holds a big meeting of member states. You should have heard the way Africans were talking during those first few hours of those September dates. Nkrumah gave a speech in support of Lumumba. As expected, Congo was taking center stage. The man got a standing ovation from most nations. But something happened when everyone went away. The CIA handed out bags full of cash and reminders that aid could be cancelled or slashed. And over the next few days, many African delegates changed their tone. They must have got word from their governments back home. Lumumba was a no-go. No one wanted to back home. Meanwhile, back in Congo, the young leader was placed under house arrest. And if you've been following my other videos, then by now, I guess you know about the rest.
Lumumba was Democratic Republic of Congo's first democratically elected prime minister after independence from Belgium in 1960. But his government lasted just 3 months before he was overthrown and assassinated. Some historians accuse the CIA of ordering the killing.
Kwame never fully recovered from Patrice's murder. And as for his seriousness about self-defense against Western imperialists, Patrice's murder just increased it further. Worldwide, the tragedy released a fervor. See, Lumumba didn't only have African relevance, he reflected what was happening to Latin Americans, Asians, Caribbeans, and Afro-Americans. Same month, John Kennedy became president. But no matter how different Kennedy seemed, he stuck to America's illegitimate Congo policy by endorsing the enemy team.
The United States has supported and will continue to support the United Nations' presence in the Congo. The only legal authority is President Kasavubu.
What made it worse was Kennedy's government getting caught supplying fighter jets to Katanga, arming the man who had Lumumba killed. Can you imagine how that made Nkrumah feel? Then, Ghanaian intelligence discovered a plot a government minister made with Americans to overthrow Nkrumah and replace him as president. When he got hold of all the evidence, he realized that British soldiers in the regiments of Ghana's army were a colonial element. Some of them considered Nkrumah wholly irrelevant, like Major General Henry Alexander, pretty much the British Army's man in Ghana. Now, Alexander was a fan of drama. He was always instigating, spreading misinformation. He played a part in the Congo disintegration, and it took Nkrumah a while to see the whole panorama. He fired every white officer in Ghana's army. Alexander literally broke down in tears, then came back to Britain like, I ain't even tripping, I'm calm, G. Ghana's finished, Kwame's balmy. This was September 61. A tricky month for the UN, very sticky one. Dag Hammarskjöld, the Secretary General, died under questionable circumstances. He'd come to the Congo in search of answers, and apparently his plane crashed in Rhodesia. The story swept across international media, but the British authorities of Northern Rhodesia didn't really seem to want to talk to the media. They conducted their own investigation without the transparency of a normal procedure. Surprise, surprise, they ruled it unsuspicious. But in recent years, a judge appointed by the UN to investigate Hammarskjöld's death has been saying something different.
It appears plausible that an external attack or threat may have been a cause of the crash, whether by way of a direct attack or by causing a momentary distraction of the pilots.
Some claim Nkrumah became paranoid around this time. But is that really fair to say? When people the West perceived as a threat kept finding new ways to meet with their death. The Cameroonian Félix Moumié was killed by French Secret Service in Geneva. The Martinican revolutionary Frantz Fanon wouldn't make it past the early 60s either. Kwame was more than a little bit concerned. In 1962, his suspicions were confirmed by 2 assassination attempts. As you can imagine, these were major events. Everything started changing from then. All of a sudden, the police were armed and there was no more laughter in the streets of Ghana. And when attempts on Nkrumah's life caused the death of children, democracy left the building. That's when Ghana became a one-party state and Nkrumah made himself president for life. Economic alienation by the West slowed down the country's developmental drive, and in the end, it's like nothing changed. The dream of independence went up in flames. I hope you've had as much fun watching this video as I've had making this. So feel free to like and subscribe, comment your favorite bits, and sign up to the mailing list.